Hello, Doctor Jennifer Platt, and welcome to the Tick Boot Camp podcast.
Good afternoon.
All right, and we need some energy from everyone today, and I have an energetic human being co-hosting with me. One of my favorite humans, Nicoletta Forbes, is co-hosting with me. So, hey, Nicoletta, how are you? And welcome to
Hi.
joining me again as a co-host.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I'm always excited to work with you, and I'm really happy to have now met a new friend with Dr. Jennifer. So, Dr. Platt, why don't you talk to us a little bit about what you're doing right now? We're going to get into your background, but talk to us a little bit about Tick Warrior and some of the work that you're doing in that community, because that's how we found you, and I'm sure many folks who listen to this podcast will be at least generally familiar with you and your work.
Yeah, sure. So golly, where do I even start? So when I was working on my doctorate, I got really sick from a tick bite. A few years later, I was kind of at a confluence in my career. And I was, driving down the road one day and I said, ticks, I need to do something around ticks. And I said, tick warriors. And I pulled over. This was in 2016. Okay. So I pulled over and I pulled up my phone and I looked at Tick Warriors. Nobody had that URL.
All right, so there we go. So you found a domain name that was going to memorialize the spirit of this organization you were going to create.
Yes.
And tell us about Tick Warriors. That's really what I like to focus on first, because I want to take you through the whole journey.
So, yeah. So thank you, first of all, so much for having me. This is truly my passion, and very excited about this. So I've spent my whole career in the environmental field and working to make a difference and supporting others in being who they are. And if you're really sick, you can't be who you are. And so Tick Warriors was born because of the desire to have products that are not only safe for the environment, but effective, right? And that's so critical. And you go through the course of environmental history and looking at products, and that first round of stuff usually isn't that good. But when I started Tick Warriors, I went around and I kept contacting manufacturers. I need stuff that's great, effective, and has an evidence base. It was so important to me to do that. And I kept calling manufacturers and they'd be like, oh, well, people tell us it's good, but I had no lab evidence. And then somebody said to me, well, why don't you talk to Homs, this company that was in my own county, and they had spent years working with NC State, which is right down the road from me in central North Carolina, and had products and had an evidence base in my county. So it just felt like it was, the universe laying things out in front of me to do that. And so I launched Tick Warriors. It was not ironically, maybe it was on Earth Day when I came up with the idea, April 22nd, 2016. And I knew every day mattered, right? Because our highest tick activity is in April and May, June, right? So every day was precious. So I came up with the idea. I got a website together. I got the LLC and the products, and I launched it at the end of May. So
All right, well, thank you for doing that. Yeah, thank you.
Very quick, and we were
awesome.
off and running with that.
So where can folks find you? I mean, we're going to talk more about this at the end of the podcast, but where can folks find you? Because I've been on your site. It really is well done. It's very
thank you.
Where can folks find it?
So it's tickwarriors.com, and that's where our online store is, and information about ticks and how to prevent exposure. And then as well as our sister nonprofit is mentioned in there a few times as well, because in the course of doing this work and providing products, so maybe two things. So the focus of our company is protection for people, pets, and property. Because really, you just can't do things. Repellent alone for us isn't going to solve the problem, right? It isn't going to reduce our exposure. So I'm a big believer in a systems approach, using things to balance each other out. Because if something falls through, then you have another, backup. So that's what our website's all about, is how do you protect yourself, your family, your loved ones, your pets, and then finally your properties. And in the South, that has not really made it into the standard. I feel like it's happening more in the Northeast, but in the South, it hasn't yet. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Well, cool. Thank you. So let's introduce folks to you. So where did you grow up? Where are you from?
So I grew up in the Ozarks in Northwest Arkansas, which ironically or not again is another extremely dense area with Lone Star ticks and sick people, tick-borne diseases. And maybe that was my pull to North Carolina, which is where I am now. So I grew up in Arkansas. I went to my undergrad in Arkansas. And then while I was, I was in my sophomore year, I came to North Carolina to Chapel Hill to the first National Student Environmental Conference. And I fell in love with Chapel Hill.
All right. Before we get to Chapel Hill, I want to sort of build out a little bit more about your background in Arkansas.
Yeah.
So you did tease a little bit that it's a tick endemic area where you were growing up. Were you aware of ticks during your childhood? Was it something that you were educated about in some way, either in school, in health classes, through social activities? And what do you know about ticks?
So when I was a girl, ticks were not a big problem. There was nothing like they are now. The most exposure to ticks was really on our dog, who was outside all the time. My dad is a doctor. He's a radiologist. And so I feel like we had more awareness of ticks and needing to remove them. I have a memory of having one when I was maybe 8, and it was on my head, and they used cigarette to get the tick, it's like lit the cigarette to make it come off. So that's really my only memory. I went to Girl Scout camp every summer. It was in the, in the Ozarks as well. I don't remember really ever getting a tick bite. I knew about them.
Doesn't mean you didn't get one.
Yeah.
Just don't remember having found one, right? And
Right.
so as a Girl Scout, were you out camping, and were you given any information about how to be aware of ticks and how to check yourself for ticks and anything like that as a Girl Scout?
No, nobody ever. I mean, the big concern really was mosquitoes. And, I don't even remember if we had repellent. Maybe we did, but yeah, mosquitoes was really the focus, right?
So now you stay in Arkansas. By the way, Nicoletta grew up in Arkansas as well. So this may be the first time we've had 2 gals from the Ozarks
Oh my gosh.
doing podcast.
Wow.
So, yeah, I grew up in Hot Springs. And so I remember playing as a kid, and it was like we would come in and mom would be like, okay, everyone take your clothes off so that way I can check you for ticks, right? But like you said, it's the dogs. The dogs were the ones we really checked for ticks.
Yeah. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, that's so great.
Yep.
Small world.
Small world. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you said you went to school. You said you did your undergraduate work in Arkansas. So where did you go to school, and what was your major?
So my undergrad was at Hendrix College, which is in Conway, just outside Little Rock. So my family, Nicoletta, is all in Little Rock. So spent a lot of time there and down in Hot Springs. So After I went to that student environmental conference, I decided, at that point I had been undecided on my major. I ended up creating my own degree. They had a program at Hendrix called Integrative Studies, and I created a degree in environmental studies. So there were a couple of other young women and they were interested in it too. So we kind of put our heads together and we came up with a curriculum, and then we presented it. So the way it worked is you had to, get a committee of the professors and get them to approve your curriculum. And I ended up being the first student to graduate with that degree, which is now a degree at Hendrix.
Well, congratulations. So you were a trendsetter. So now again, this is pre-Dr. Platt.
Yes.
So you went to this conference, and this spurred something in you, some purpose in you, or some understanding of your purpose. So talk to us about that. How you finally started to find some direction, and you started to form your desires, that allowed you to go from being an undecided or undeclared major to somebody who is creating a major for herself, and now many students who have now followed in your path.
Yeah. So when I was growing up, my grandmother, Rosalie, always encouraged me to do something of service, to be of service. She was one of the most incredible humanitarians I've ever known. And so originally I thought, like my dad is a medical doctor, I thought I wanted to be a doctor. But Dr. Johnson's cell biology class freshman year made me realize I was not cut out to be a doctor. And
Oh,
so
is it cut out, or is it that wasn't where the spirit was taking you?
it was, yeah, I was definitely not, it just wasn't
You weren't
right.
called.
It
You
wasn't
weren't.
where the spirit was going to take me. I was
It
not
wasn't your calling.
doing the science as well as I wanted to. So, um, and then I went to the conference in Chapel Hill, and I just felt at home. I felt like, the environmental field, back then, Earth Day 1990, it was about, a renaissance of Earth Day 1970. And it was really about, some core issues dealing with, trash and recycling and water quality. And
So tell us, like, why was that speaking to you then? What was it about trash and water quality, and what was the draw there? Why was that a calling for you, and
sure.
how do you feel like you were serving by studying that?
So just the opportunity to help make the environment a better place for us, right? It's like human health and environmental health are intricately interconnected. And I really liked the ecology and the ecosystems based, approach to understanding how our world works. So it just felt like a natural, um, evolution of my interest in this in the environment. I loving being out of doors, finding a way to work to improve environmental health, and then as a result, helping human health, right? So that was my
All right.
quest.
So one of the beautiful things about going to college is you not only find out what you do not want to do, and despite probably appreciating the contributions your dad was making and wanting to model that, that wasn't what your calling was, and you were able to check that box off and move to other places to see what else would speak to you. And now you found your place, right? You decided that the way you were going to serve humanity is that you were going to try to create a healthy place so that humans could be healthy in the healthy place, understanding that there is going to be a direct relationship between the place that we're living and our health. So
Yeah.
talk to us about how that passion then developed when you moved to Chapel Hill, and where did you go to school, and what was your major when you went to graduate school?
Yeah. So before I shift into Chapel Hill, what I should mention is that at Hendrix, I co-founded an environmental group called SAVE, which was Student Activities That Value the Earth. So I was starting to, kind of do my activism and advocacy, right, and policy. So that's where Chapel Hill at the Gilling School of Global Public Health, in that school, they had a Department of Environmental Sciences and an Environmental Management and Policy track. So
All right. So so you discover your passion. You founded a student organization that was going to do work in the public health arena. You were going to try to establish public policy that would serve humanity by protecting our environment, and that now takes you to a major in public health. So talk to us about what you were learning there and how that was filling your cup.
Yeah. So really, the interesting thing is, because I went straight from college to graduate school, I think I didn't know a lot of the questions to ask, right? Because I just hadn't had much worldly experience. So I just kind of took in all the courses that were required, right? The environmental law and, water quality. And I can't even remember all the, environmental policy, like the history of environmental policy in the United States. So all of those kind of foundational courses that you do in an environmental management and policy program.
All right. So now talk to us about as you're on this educational journey, as you're now defining your passion, you're finding your purpose. You are now starting to get sick. So talk to us about when you first started to get sick and what those symptoms were.
Sure. So, fast forward many years, I was by that time, I was working on my doctorate in public health. And I was, let's see, so I had a 2-year-old, and I was one day.
Was this your first child?
Andrew, yes.
Yeah. So your first child, 2 years old, you start to have
Yeah.
symptoms.
Yeah,
Okay.
just one.
Okay.
And so I just, all of a sudden one day I went to pick him up. It was in June of 2011 or May probably. I went to pick him up from daycare and I couldn't carry him. So I was just all of a sudden like just this extreme weakness. And I remember asking his daycare lady to carry him to the car for me. And then that's when I first started to realize something was really wrong.
So you didn't have any symptoms before you didn't have the ability to carry a baby to the car? I mean, that's the first symptom.
Yeah, that was it.
Were you relatively healthy leading up to that time from your early life till that day?
So, so in college, I got the typical mono, but I never got a cold until graduate school. I didn't understand what it was like to have a cold. As a kid, I had, when I was 2, I did get chicken pox and mumps. It was kind of funny. I had it at the same time, and I had this stuffed little chicken, and I thought it had given me the chicken pox for some reason. So I blamed the stuffed animal. And but and I got when I was in elementary school, I probably got strep several times, took antibiotics, but really other than that, no. I got through grad school, had a few colds, got through. My early career was rarely missed sick days, rarely missed work for sick days. And
So you're relatively healthy, with the exception of, getting little bugs here and there, and typical childhood illnesses. You were very healthy until
yeah,
this day that you go to pick your child up at daycare and you can't pick up a baby.
yeah,
So
yeah.
give me some more detail. I mean, what did it feel like? How did you know you couldn't pick them up? What was happening there that, made it so that you couldn't carry a baby?
Yeah, I just, I got out of the car and I went in, and when I came back out, I realized I couldn't pick them up. And that it was just weird, so I spent, it's one of the things that I realized is, it takes me a while to realize, uh, especially then, like, what exactly is going on? Like, this is happening. And it seems like it came out of nowhere, and I just couldn't do it. So then I got on the phone and called a friend of a friend who was a nurse, and I thought I had sunstroke, like heat poisoning or sun poisoning or something like that, because it just happened so quickly.
Now, at that time, do you either recall being bitten by a tick just before then, or were you in a very stressful time in your life? Were you burning the candle at too many different ends, or were both things happening?
Yeah. So, it was a stressful time because I was working on my doctorate and I was trying to write my dissertation, trying. And but it took a long time to remember. I have a very fuzzy memory of waking up in the middle of the night, uh, pulling a tick off of me.
How long
So,
before that?
um, uh, probably 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, not very long.
Mm.
And that's what, we're dealing with kind of some different, with the Lone Star tick. I do know it was a Lone Star tick. It carries a different suite of diseases.
Yeah, and we're gonna talk about tick. We're gonna talk about different types of ticks, and you were bitten by a tick a couple weeks before. It was a Lone Star tick, and we know
Yeah.
that Lone Star ticks do not harbor Borrelia. Um, and then you're in a very stressful time in your life, right? So
Yeah.
you're a young mom. You have a 2-year-old, not just 2-year-old, a 2-year-old boy. You're trying to write your dissertation so that you can finally complete this educational journey. I mean, it's
Mhm.
just a very stressful time. Were you working? Give me the rest of what was going on in your life that was causing you to feel so overwhelmed.
Yeah. Just, all the pressure of trying to finish. I was working, I was managing an international environmental health project at UNC, and you know, trying to raise a child. So, and being in a marriage and, like all the things. So yes, it was a lot of things to manage.
What about the environment that you were living in? One of the things that we always focus on, because of some of the information we learned from Dr. Rawls and Dr. Phillips, is that rarely does someone go from tick bite to chronic illness. In most cases, there is a relatively large gap in time. But
Mhm.
there are some situations where someone does suffer a tick bite and then becomes chronically ill. Of course, having a lot of stress is going to be one of those formulas, but also living in a moldy environment could also play a large role in shortening that journey. What was your house like? What were the buildings that you were working in like? I mean, and was mold a factor in your life at that time?
Sure. So I had Hashimoto's. So I already had an underlying autoimmune condition, right? First off the bat. Um, I lived in the woods, so I lived in a risky environment. I don't know I mean, it was a relatively new house, but it's in North Carolina, which is the deep South. It's extremely humid here. I think a lot of us in the South are living in moldy environments and don't understand it. So who knows how bad that was. yeah, I was, stressed being a mom, trying to work, being in a marriage that wasn't going great. So there were a lot of stressors. Yeah.
All right, so how did things develop from there? You can't pick up a baby. You
Yeah.
need help getting the baby to the car. I'm sure that was really stressful as well. Like, how am I going to get the baby out of the car now that I got him in the car, right? I mean, there's all that of course, in the short term. But so how are your symptoms developing?
So I got home and I just remember all I could think. So, getting him out of the car is two. He could walk and, you're not fighting gravity to get him out of the car. So gravity works to your advantage. And so, I don't know what I did with Andrew. I just remember all I could think was I felt like death. And that was like, I wondered if I needed to call an ambulance. Like it is so hard to describe, like the extreme malaise and like just nothing. And so that's when I called my friend Shannon, that I thought, I had a heat stroke or something. And she said, no, it sounds like a tick bite. And she's a nurse. So somehow, by then my husband had come home. Somehow I drove myself to an urgent care. I don't know how I did it, but I did. Yeah.
I mean, that
I
sounds.
mean, no, I was just gonna say your friend Shannon, that was like a godsend, because for someone to pick it up that quickly, that's like a one in I don't know how many. It just doesn't happen.
I know.
It,
I
it,
know.
it is the one in the gazillion, right? I mean, in most cases, the
Yeah.
diagnostic journey is really long. And of course, the longer the diagnostic journey, the longer the healing journey, right? So you were
Yeah.
very, very lucky to be in the place that you were, where somebody was able to give you that very speedy diagnosis, right? And that's wonderful, and congratulations, right? So, and I guess the good news for our listeners is this is where Nicoletta is going to pick up, because we now had a very short diagnostic journey, and now you know that the tick bite is the connection between this malaise, right? I mean, one of the things that I know frustrate folks in the Lyme community is that people try to compare being tired to being exhausted from this chronic illness. So before Nicoletta takes over and brings you through, the next step in your journey, give me some sense of what the exhaustion was like, and how that was unlike anything else you had ever felt before, despite, of course, at times in your life being tired.
Mm. Yeah. Maybe it's like if all of a sudden you have weights all over your body, like even like 10-pound weights all over your body, multiple 10-pound weights, and it takes every ounce of exertion you have to even move. And I think that's probably it. And remember, I didn't remember the tick bite, but Shannon nailed it, yes, but I didn't remember it for a long time. But so all I knew is that I just had this horrible feeling that something was very, very wrong with me.
Hmm. So you didn't see a lot of doctors, because you had your friend Shannon, thank God, right, was able to find it. Besides having Hashimoto's, was there anything else that you were diagnosed or misdiagnosed with, or anything like that before your Lyme?
No, really not that I remember. I had uh I had some heart issues in my 30s where I got tachycardia, and my heart would just beat really, really fast. And in hindsight, it was probably triggered by stress, but once my heart tripped over, it wouldn't slow down unless I went to the emergency room and got shot up with adenosine. So, when the doctors, when you start recognizing the ER staff is you're going too often. So,
Right.
so I got that dealt with in my mid 30s. And then it was like, smooth sailing as far as just trying to figure out my thyroid. Really was the main thing that was on
Okay.
my radar.
So when you got diagnosed with Lyme, was it a blood diagnosis? Was it just clinical? And then did they diagnose you with any other tick-borne diseases, or was it just Lyme?
So I was actually diagnosed with ehrlichiosis. So not Lyme.
Okay.
I was diagnosed with, so he ran lab work. Usually what they call the tick panel down here is ehrlichiosis and the rickettsial diseases and Lyme are the main ones that they're checking for. But he, luckily enough, put me on antibiotics immediately, on doxycycline immediately, because again, it was just like I don't know, universe, God, whatever, it's like that I got a provider that was willing to treat me starting immediately. Now here's the thing, and here the rickettsial diseases and ehrlichiosis, especially for people that are immune compromised or other vulnerable populations, these diseases can be fatal if they're not treated within 5 to 7 days. So I said I felt like death. I could have died.
Right. There was a reason. Oh
I could have
goodness.
died if I didn't get treated, probably
Yeah.
the weekend, because I was in that window. I was in that very short time frame window. Um, and so that's why it's so dangerous.
And so you went to urgent care, and was that the doctor that diagnosed you that did the blood panel, or did you see a Lyme specialist, or was it just the urgent care doctor?
So the urgent care doctor ran the panel, and then I had lab work. That was the lab work, and I guess I got the results 2 or 3 days later. And I can't remember some of, I have brain fog still, some details I'm not always good at remembering, but I had a um, kind of holistic practitioner that I was working with.
Okay.
And I think I had already been working with her when I got sick. I don't remember. But when I went to her with this issue, she said, we are going to keep you on the doxy until, like we're going to keep you on it for a while. And that was, another very amazing thing, right? Is that I was working with kind of an integrative practitioner, and that she put me on a lot of different things to try to help me with that journey.
Do you know how long you were on the antibiotic for? Because I know everyone gets a different time frame that they're on it, right? Depending on the doctor you see.
Yes, so the urgent care doctor, I think that was only a 2-week prescription, but when I got to my other doctor, she
Mhm.
kept it going. And I remember balking, right? Because antibiotics, you're not supposed to be on antibiotics for a long time. I was really anxious about that. And I mean, because we're getting into the months, right? It's like
Yeah.
2, 3, 4 months. And I still, I, I, I had no energy. I was able to muster up enough strength to get up take my child to school or to daycare and then go back home and pretty much went to bed. And so, the doctor told me that when I was balking, she said, here's the thing. She said, if you can't, and this is 2011, so she was really cutting edge, I think, right? 13 years ago. She said,
Yeah.
if we don't nip this in the bud now, you could have long-term chronic issues. So,
Did you at any point do a PICC line, or was it just oral antibiotics?
yeah, it was just oral antibiotics. And then she also had me doing, I was trying to remember, because I just remember taking a lot of different kinds of supplements. Like I know she had like high dose vitamin C. My vitamin D was probably at the bottom of the range. So she put me on a prescription strength vitamin D. And that was those are my main memories of that first round of work with her, was just taking a lot of different supplements.
What other modalities did you use? Did you do anything like herbs, yoga, ozone therapy, glutathione, a lot of the things that fall under the holistic umbrella, I would say. Infrared sauna, any stem cell therapy, anything like that? Did you do any of that?
So a few years later, I actually, as I was starting, let's see, before I started Tick Warriors, and I had a job with really great insurance, I started seeing an LLMD, and I could afford it.
And an LLMD is a Lyme literate medical doctor.
Yes, thank you. You're right.
For everyone that doesn't know.
Yeah. So I found a local doctor that I was able to work with, because, we, with the original, diagnosis doctor, she treated me until I got to a point of testing negative on ehrlichiosis. So she said, we're going to you're going to stay on the antibiotics and all the supplements until you get to, until this clears. She wanted to clear it. So we did. And then maybe, what was that? 2, 3 or 4 years later, I decided to work with a, integrative functional medicine doctor who was an LLMD. It's not like at that point, tick-borne diseases were still on my radar, because when you're I've often wished that we could just spend a little bit of time in other people's bodies so we could understand what it's like. Because my normal was not normal, like I thought it was okay. But then, when I went to him and we started running more tests, and he put me on antibiotics again, and then I went off, and that's when I started feeling bad. So I could, that's kind of a key with these, with that approach, right? Is if you go off and you still feel bad, that's like, ding, 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 something not right here. So that doctor, I did do some other modalities. I did a lot of glutathione, like IV treatments, the bags of various things, and just felt amazing after those. I figured out I had an allergy to nickel, and I had a brace in my mouth. And so we took that out because, it was like constantly stressing my body with the nickel. So we took that out, and those were, he had me on a lot of supplements and pulsing antibiotics treatments and other things that I can't remember them all, but that went on and on. And then, I would do it for several months and then I just stopped because it's just, it's like you were talking a while ago about PTSD. I just got to a point where I couldn't take any more pills.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like if I have to take another pill, I'm just I don't even know what. So I'd take a break and then I'd go back and take a break and then go back. So yeah, so that went on for a couple of years.
That was going to be my next question. So from the time your friend Shannon, right, was like, hey, that sounds like Lyme, to now, how long has that been? Since 2011?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
been
And
quite a bit of time. Are you
yeah.
still treating for Lyme or any of the tick-borne
So,
illnesses?
so this is, this is where I've kind of had like a big ebb and flow of my different conditions. So when I was seeing the LLMD is when they first found evidence with PCR testing of both Lyme and Babesia. So who knows when I got it? I have no idea. Was it there all along? Did it happen after the ehrlichiosis? Because, occasionally I would have tick bites, but never really feeling like there was a big change like there was in 2011. But then, so I had to stop with the LLMD around 2018 because I couldn't afford it anymore. I found another practitioner that I worked with, and the big change was going on low dose naltrexone, the LDN. The goal was to reduce my, foundational level inflammation, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
That was really helpful. That's made a big difference. I was also doing B12 injections, having to give myself shots in my stomach, which was unbelievable because I grew up having to have allergy shots and I hated shots, but
I know. I'm terrified of needles. No way. No way.
you rise to the occasion when you have to.
But yeah, right. Desperate times call for desperate measures. So go on.
Oh yeah, no. So then, so I was I felt like with the low dose naltrexone. So now we're like in, 2019, 2020. I was feeling pretty good. Was that like the flow, right? Like I was feeling pretty good. And then boom, the pandemic hit. I traveled like 3 times in March of 2020. And I went through like 5 different airports. I never was officially diagnosed with COVID per se, but something knocked me down. And now I couldn't get out of bed. Later, there became evidence, and this was maybe in April and May of 2020. In May I said, I called up my doctor. I was like, this is, so my child by then was 9 and I was single. This was, so having a parent as a single parent from your bed, a 9-year-old, it's like not sustainable. So I called my doctor. I was like, something's wrong. We need to do something. And we have such a great relationship. I'm so blessed to have a healthcare provider that will listen to me and that will do, like follow based on trusting my gut. And so we tested, and come to find out my Epstein-Barr had flared. I was so, what they know now is that COVID can re-trigger your Epstein-Barr and your Lyme. So here I am. I was pretty good, and then boom, I got knocked back. And that's kind of the, chronic journey now, right? It's like you do great, and then something happened, and boom, you kind of fall back for a while.
So then now, what your battery life now? What would you say your battery's at currently?
So, a couple other things happened along the way. I've, got my battery up, and then a couple of years after that, I got mast cell activation, MCAS. And then I happened to be in my little town. We have one of the most polluted water supplies in the US with PFAS, which are the industrial contaminants. And despite all of my efforts to, have my water filtered and stuff, I've participated in a local study and found out that I had high PFAS in my blood. And, so then I managed all of that. The big thing coming out of the pandemic for me was going to like what I call a stealth pathogen protocol, and just working religiously on massage and acupuncture and an herbal underlying, a la Bill Rawls, you need to have that foundation so that you can be stronger. Now I would say I'm at about 80%. So, a year ago, I sat in front of my doctor in August, and it was almost surreal. He just thumbed through all the lab work. This is really good. This level, this is really good. This level, this is really good. And on and on and on throughout my whole report. My labs were the best, Nicoletta.
Oh, that's amazing.
They'd been in my life, right? And it was almost surreal. I couldn't believe it. I remember spending time with my family, and I just couldn't even tell them how great the news was, because I couldn't believe it.
That's amazing.
It was. Unfortunately, a month later, I had to go back to the Ozarks. And this is another ebb and flow. I got bit by a couple of larval ticks, and I developed alpha-gal.
Alpha-gal syndrome. Fun. My husband had that for a little bit too. It did go away. So I do have a question for you.
Yeah.
What would you do differently if you had to do it again? Is there anything you would do differently?
It took me a long time to realize this, but I was gaslighting myself. We talk about being gaslit by medical providers. It's almost like I had all the providers, right? I mean, I had the urgent care doctor and the, integrated health person, and all the doctors were supporting me, but I wasn't supporting me. I wasn't listening and trusting myself and honoring what was really going on with me.
Can you expand on that? Like an example, when you say you were gaslighting yourself, what is something you would say to yourself where now you look back and you're like, I should not have said that to myself, or should have thought that, or whatever.
Yeah. So just acknowledging the severity of what I was dealing with. So here's an example. Very shortly after I had the ehrlichiosis diagnosis, I was scheduled to speak at a conference in DC. And I was determined to do it. And this is within a couple of weeks. So I was still feeling very, very ill. But I went up to DC. I went to the conference. I found like in the women's room, there was like a lounge. So I strategized that I could, okay, go to the conference, you go sit in the lounge and you just like rest, right? And then you can muster up the energy to go do your 20-minute, 30-minute workshop that you're leading, and then you can go back to the lounge, right? But I never really shared the severity. Like even all of this stuff I'm telling you now, people that listen to it that know me are going to be like, whoa, because I just haven't shared about it. And so even sharing about it with myself, understanding how severe it was, it took me a long time down the road to realize you're really dealing with something. Yeah.
But it's a lot bigger than we think, right?
Yes. I remember wishing that I could have, one of those word balloons over my head that said, you look, I may look great, but I feel like death. I feel so bad. And I was just like, wanted this marquee that would explain to everybody how like the face doesn't match the feeling.
Yeah. Is there, on that same line of question, is there anything that you would do different from like a medical standpoint as far as like the antibiotics, the holistic treatments, anything in that sense, anything that you would tell other listeners to try that maybe at first you were like, you know what, I'm not going to try this. And then you ended up trying it and you're like, man, I should have done that sooner. Is there anything like that that you would recommend?
So, it's almost like when you live in a tick endemic area, you need to boost your immune system going into that. I think that's, if I could change anything, it would be understanding just how important your health is, like eating nutritiously, right? Like food is medicine, and just supporting your body immune system, I think, is so critical. And we kind of lost, I think, in a lot of ways, we've lost track of that. We've become a symptom-oriented society. Like, let's just treat the symptoms and not the underlying causes. So I think that's what I would do differently, is honor the health and understanding just how imperative it is to work to be healthy.
Speaking of work, you just said work. Are you currently able to work?
So I am working. It is, the spoons theory and chronic illness. And I don't know if you've heard of that, where you just think of yourself as you've got like a certain number of spoons. And then when those spoons are full, you can't do anymore. And so I am working, but I am not at my full capacity right now. And I know that I have been, right, several times over the last 13 years. And, that's my hope now, is that I've seen the ebb and the flow. I've been up and I've been down, and now I hope that I just have to keep working to get back to a great place again.
A lot of work for money, work to get healthy, just work. That's all we do, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Lots of complicating factors.
So let's Jennifer, let's talk about terrain, right? Because you're a terrain profession. All right.
Mm.
We here at Tick Boot Camp talk about Lyme disease as a risk formula, and it's threat times vulnerability. We use the Stanley McChrystal, General Stanley McChrystal model from his book Risk, um, and um, and we focus on both pieces of the risk formula where we look at the threat, of course, which is getting bitten by ticks or coming in contact with these microbes through some other behaviors that we might be able to come in contact with them, versus the vulnerability. And of course, I think the vulnerability piece is really the terrain piece, right? And one of the things that you learned very early on in your personal journey was that the terrain that we live in is going to have an impact on the terrain that our spirit lives in, or our body, and the terrain that our spirit is living in, or our body, is going to have an impact on whether or not we're able to manage the microbe load that we have, right? Because one of the things that I really enjoyed about the conversation that you and Nicoletta were having was that your pot would boil over, to use the Rolls metaphor, and then you'd lower the heat and your terrain was more manageable, and then
Yeah.
the heat would come up again and it would boil over again and you'd get chronically ill again. And then you were able to lower the heat, then you managed the microbes, your terrain, and then it would boil over again. And that's really, so like I kept envisioning, as you two were going through telling this beautiful story, this pot boiling over and over again, right? So talk to us about how this experience was informative for you as a terrain expert.
Mm. So, it's so hard when you're in something to understand, right? Because it's like right there in front of your face. And looking back, one of the most amazing things about this entire journey is the people that I have met. And so learning from others who are also dealing with, maybe not the exact situation, but there's a lot of parallels, and right, like you see this over and over again. And so I feel like that's probably one of my biggest takeaways from all of this, is just learning to be patient and keep trying. Like, maybe the things that worked for me before don't work as well now. And there's new things that are out, right? There's new modalities, or we learn about modalities that have been done in other cultures for maybe decades or centuries, right? So for me, it's a big lesson in patience and understanding that hopefully the answer comes in front of me.
Yeah, so let's talk more about the environment, right? Because you learned when you were a college student that
Oh,
that the way you were going to serve the
oh, yes.
world
Okay.
was
So you
the way
mean
you
the
were going.
physical environment?
I do. I mean, the impact that the physical environment is going to have on your personal environment, right? Because like each one of us has our own environment, right?
Right.
And what the classic debate that has been played out in the medical community is terrain versus germ theory, right? And in most cases, of course, modern medicine focuses on germs. And germ theory was very powerful, and because of Pasteur's discovery of germs and the connection between germs and illness, that there were some steps that we can take to aid our immune system by reducing microbe load. But the problem is we've gotten away from the understanding of the importance of our terrain or our immune system, right? And then, of course, the larger terrain, which you started to touch on, is going to be impacted by the people in our environment and the health of our environment, not only our home environment. We talked a little bit about mold, but of course, the larger environment that we find ourselves in, and you found yourself having issues with water quality where you live, and these other issues. So give us, that picture where the physical environment that you were passionate about helping us to manage, and that's how you found your place in the world, which is really what our purpose is, so finding our place in the world. How that was something that came back to be helpful to you in your journey with Lyme disease, and how that is now giving you insight into how you can better serve the world now that you've been on this journey.
Yeah. So, a couple things in the, going back to what I said earlier about systems approaches, like to thinking about complex problems. Problems will never be solved with one kind of solution, right? It's like COVID's never going to be solved with just vaccines. That's a very current example, but I think for me, one thing that is really hitting close to home right now is how we manage ticks in our environment. And with indiscriminate pesticide spraying, we're actually killing the predators of the ticks. So this is,
yeah, so let's talk about that, Dr. Platt, because I think there's two pieces to that, right? Because the first thing is that we're living in a physical environment that is not supporting us in our terrain, right? And then the other side of that coin, of course, is that the environmental changes that are occurring, climate change, for example, global warming, for example, is actually making the earth more habitable to ticks, right? And the breeding window is expanding for ticks, right? The climate is changing both north and south and becoming warmer, so ticks have a larger environment where they can succeed and survive. Then of course, what's happening with all the wildlife and all of the blood meals that are available to them, right? And then of course you have the predator piece where that which is eating the ticks is being affected by the pesticide use that we use. So give us that whole sort of multifaceted layering of how the environment is making us more vulnerable because we're less likely to fight off the diseases, and it's increasing the threat because there are more ticks and we're more likely to come in contact with the ticks.
Yeah, it's so complicated, and I feel like there's several different layers that are the same. So
that's why we have you on, Dr. Platt, to break that all down for us.
we have our microbiome in our gut, right? Like the disruption of our microbiomes is perhaps one of the reasons that we're dealing with all these chronic illnesses, right? Like the evidence base is getting more and more. Maybe that's why people at some point are more susceptible to alpha-gal. We know people, Nicoletta, like your husband, when they really get a hold on their gut microbiota, they can put their alpha-gal into remission. Like the evidence is still working, growing on that. But we've seen it anecdotally over and over. People that get their gut health in place do great. And so, so we got like our own little inner worlds, right, that we need to get managed or supported, sustained, whatever that looks like. To me, it feels like that is just another, like when we look at the external environment and the ticks in the environment, like we have a whole ecosystem that's out of balance. And, pesticides are affecting tick populations, right? They're affecting us, they're affecting our food, they're affecting what we eat, they're affecting our gut microbiome. So many different layers, but, and Rich, you said this a while ago about, the predators, like, we have the apex predators that are no longer really in the ecosystem managing it like they did before, right? It's like the wolves and coyotes keeping the deer population in check. So then when we have a deer population out of balance, then that, deer, when I look at them, they're tick factories, right? It's like the Lone Star tick thrives on deer blood. So that's all that's, it's like got all these little thousands of deer factories, tick factories running around. So, I hope I'm answering your
You're
question.
answering the question. Like it is a multi-layered challenge
Yeah,
that that we're dealing with here.
it
And
is.
and look, there is a direct correlation between the size of the deer population and the prevalence of Lyme disease, right? But but then again, and maybe you should talk about this as a public health professional. There really isn't a will to reduce the deer population, right? Because they are beautiful animals, and again, I live in a community that has a very large deer population, and I really enjoy seeing the deer. I like going running and seeing the deer, and I like seeing the baby deer, and I mean,
I
and
literally saw 2 deer walk by my window while we were talking a few minutes ago.
so I mean, some of this from a public health standpoint is important because the more deer we have in our communities, the more blood meals there are. The more blood meals there are, the more ticks are going to be produced, and they're going to survive to when a period of time when they're going to survive. The more of them that survives, the more likely is the greater likelihood we're going to come in contact with, right? So we know that the research is very clear on that, but there's not a will in most communities to reduce the deer population. There just simply isn't, regardless of the various tools that could be used to do that, right? And again, I'm not a hunter, but I do believe that that the sports person community would be more than happy to participate in reducing the deer population, which would have a direct impact on Lyme disease, but we don't have the will to do it. So what do we do about that, Dr. Platt?
And yeah, so this is where the policy comes into place, right? Like we need to have better policies on predator control or support. So, in our state, they have coyote hunts. They're proud of killing the coyotes, right? Like we have this conflict where their populations are being diminished, and so they can't keep the deer in check. I don't know why we don't have I don't know why we have limits on doe. Like there are, hunting policies that I think can be changed. There's other ways that I feel like in terms of pesticide management that, like I said a while ago, that, in a way, we are killing off the predators of the ticks. So that goes all the way down, right? Like you think about snakes. Snakes are like, you were like, what? How do snakes deal with ticks? Well, snakes are eating the mice that have the ticks on them, right? Like, and it's not popular to like snakes or to support snake population. So there's so many different things that I think we just need to move to an ecosystem based management ethos, maybe, where we think about all the impacts of our actions on different levels of the environment around us.
Right, and of course, the other challenge that we have with the environment. Let's go back to your passion, because you understood very early in life that our environment, a healthy environment will mean a healthy human, and an unhealthy environment will be an unhealthy human, right? So you did talk about the risk piece of this, but let's talk about the vulnerability piece of this, because one of the things we've learned from Dr. Rawls, for example, is that we as a human population are harboring over 200 different chemicals that the human population has never come in contact with. They're synthetic chemicals. Now, some of that is in pesticides, some of that is in other vehicles of transmission to us, but our bodies are harboring all kinds of metals and chemicals and plastics and other kinds of things that human populations had never come in contact with. And talking in the spirit of the pot boiling over, the more of that we are harboring or carrying in our system, the more likely it is we're going to get to the point where we're boiling over and we're going to be suffering from the immune dysfunction that's going to allow all these bugs to take off. And it may not necessarily be the bugs from a tick bite. It could be the Epstein-Barr that we picked up somewhere. It could be the chickenpox virus that our body has been managing that you'd picked up as a child, right? I mean, so much of this is really just about immune dysfunction and living in an unhealthy environment and poisoning our own environment, the way we did, for example, when we added lead to gasoline, and now we have lead everywhere in all the soil, and our food is growing, and when we're eating lead on a regular basis. So talk about that. I mean, because that really was what God brought you to the world to do, right? That's what your educational passion was. So give us more insight into that.
So, I think that it's hard to say what it's gonna take, to deal with all these different multi-layered problems in academia. So I teach public health leadership, and that's one of my jobs. And so, we call it wicked problems, right? Like these problems that have so many different layers, and we get into these vicious cycles, right? So you could actually diagram the problems, like an engineering diagram, right? Where you draw all the different like causal loop diagrams, like if this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. And then you really have to think about, where is the inflection point? Like, where can you make the change and disrupt the cycle? So that's what I think. It's one of my favorite sayings that I heard an interview one time with Bruce Springsteen, and he said, sometimes you just have to change your narrative. And that goes for all of us, right? It's like, but I think in this wicked problem of ticks and tick-borne diseases, we need to change our narrative. It is absolutely important to deal with all the different tick-borne diseases in terms of diagnosing them and treating them and keeping people, getting people well. But let's deal with the problem at the beginning, right? Like the abundance of ticks. First of all, if we didn't have all the ticks out there biting people, we wouldn't be then having to deal with all the different fallout. That's what most of your podcasts are about, right? Is like the fallout, like all of these people that are so sick. I want to urge us as a society, and we work on this in the nonprofit, on advocacy, is like really thinking about, how do we address this from a root cause, right? It's all about solving problem from root causes. And for me, I think the CDC just came out a few months ago with the vector-borne strategy. And one of the 5 strategies is on the ticks themselves. Like, let's reduce the tick populations. And that's really I feel like if we could do that, that would be a giant step in the right direction.
All right. So, but that begs the question: how do we do that? And is chemical solutions a part of that? And if chemical solutions are part of that, are we creating other downstream problems as a result of using different chemical solutions for reducing the tick population? I mean, every solution seems to be creating another problem.
Right. So in the systems thinking framework, you try to think about what are the problems that are coming out of this solution. Where I'm really starting to shift my thinking is that I think we need to manage ticks from a predator ecosystem support perspective. So like controlling supporting the predators. So right now we're indiscriminately spraying, right? Like that's a solution to dealing with ticks, is we're going out and treating properties. My company does it. But we do it in a less impactful way than other more toxic methods, but we're still doing it to some degree. So what I think we need to do is figure out, how do we support our ecosystems so that they can be more healthy? How do we support the predators of the ticks, like nematodes? You never would think, oh, nematodes, those little worms that are in the soil that you can't even see, like, yeah, they eat ticks. Spiders eat ticks, right? So like there's all kinds of wildlife eat ticks, birds eat ticks. So I think we need to figure out how to make our ecosystems healthier, and that's a multi-pronged effort. It takes the policy, it takes incentives, it takes treating the deer. There's a really great, I went down to South Texas and saw a motion activated sprayer that they were using on nilgai to spray the deer, or spray the nilgai. I say, let's try that here. I'm trying to find, some people to play with me on that. But, so like multi-pronged perspectives, integrating the education, people need to understand why it's important, the incentives, people need to have ways to do various initiatives, and then the policy, it's like you have that structure to support changing.
So we are getting very deep into the weeds here, and we're
Yeah.
close to we're about 5 minutes away from the 2-hour mark. So as fascinated as I am with this, Dr. Platt, and I could talk about political will and the challenges that that come along with predator management with you all day. I think if I shared with my wife that I was supporting the reintroduction of coyotes or wolves into our community, knowing what impact that would have on on the likelihood that my dog or cat might no longer be with us any longer. I think the likelihood is very small that there would be political will for that, right? So I do think this is really complex on so many different levels, but I
Oh
really
my goodness,
appreciate
yes.
the conversation that we're having. So that we can wind this down because you've been wonderful with your time. I'm going to let Nicoletta ask you the final question that we're going to ask you during this really wonderful podcast episode that we've had.
All right, so I had two. I got it down to one. What is a question that we didn't ask you that we should have asked you?
So
Or that you would have wanted us to ask
yeah,
you?
no. So a big piece of my work is the advocacy and the education. When you're walking down the street and people say, hey, I thought of you the other day. I got a tick bite. You know, it's kind of bittersweet. And so, I co-founded a nonprofit called Tick-Borne Conditions United. Our mission is to raise awareness about pretty much every other tick-borne disease besides Lyme. Everybody knows about Lyme. Everybody understands how debilitating it can be. That's happening in so many places across the southern United States. And it's not Lyme, it's ehrlichiosis, alpha-gal, rickettsial diseases. Deer blood kills Lyme. We do have some Lyme here, but it is not anything like the other diseases, and people aren't getting better. And so that could be a whole nother 2-hour conversation, is about what else is going on in the South. Or where the Lyme star tick is prevalent.
They do say that Lyme when you have Lyme, you have a party, right? Lyme doesn't travel alone. It travels with all of its friends.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
it's complicated, right? Like,
Very.
they don't even associate Borrelia burgdorferi with the Lone Star tick.
Yeah, yeah. But there may be some other strains that are. And I mean, again, that's a whole other line of questions. And you're right. We're gonna have to reassemble at some point in the future, the three of us, and have another 2-hour conversation. But it has been a wonderful conversation. I thank you, Dr. Platt, for spending so much of your time with us, and I want to thank you for all the great work that you're doing with both of your not-for-profits. They're both, really, really well done, and you're an absolute, star for dedicating all of your vast talents to that work. And thank you, Nicoletta, for joining me again as a co-host. You're wonderful
Thank
as
you for
always.
having me.
That was so great to meet both of you, and just thank you from the bottom of my heart for what you all are doing for people, for patients, for the world, really, right? To make it a better place.